Another episode of Lord of the Flies deep dive.
Chapter 3.
Chapter 3. So we're going to go through Chapter 3 today. We're going to do a quick summary in case you missed any key moments in the chapter. We're going to share some of our favorite quotes having to do with id, ego, superego, and other just favorite quotes that we liked. And then we're going to talk a little bit about symbolism, which you worked on this week, and give you some examples of symbolism that we have noticed so far. So, summary of Chapter 3. We start with Jack being a total animal and hunting the pigs. And clearly they've been on the island for a while because he has become one with the jungle. And he is down on the ground and sniffing out the trail and tracking the animals. And we get this really vivid description of the forest. And it just sounds really creepy and eerie, and there are a lot of creepers. He is still failing with hunting, which is getting frustrating. He still has not killed anything. So he starts to make his way back to the beach, and when he opens up the clearing and heads back down to the beach, it's this beautiful beach scene, and he sees Ralph, who is so frustrated with shelter building. So Ralph and Simon and Piggy have been building shelters, or trying to. Really, it's just Simon and Ralph building shelters and Piggy trying to keep track of the little ones who are running around. And Jack comes wandering down, and he gets some water from their little coconut shell water system, which I think is pretty cool. They decided that it's important that they keep coconut shells filled with fresh water in this one place, so everyone always has water. Good job, boys. I think that's a good choice. So Ralph and Jack kind of start to bicker and fight about what the priority should be. Ralph thinks the priority is getting rescued via building a fire, building shelters, and kind of having some order, whereas Jack thinks the most important thing, maybe he also thinks the most fun thing, is hunting for pigs. And so they start to fight about it. And I guess the end of this scene, eventually they kind of make up and they go off and go swimming in the bathing pool with all the other boys, and the air is cleared and they kind of get through their fight. And then we follow Simon into the jungle and we find kind of his secret oasis. Mm-hmm. And we'll talk more about this in a minute, but this magical place that Simon goes in the woods, in the jungle, is far more beautiful and light and kind of a safe space. Whereas when Jack was in the jungle, it felt more like this scary, creepy place. So that's a summary of Chapter 3. We end in Simon's secret oasis.
And just to add a couple notes there, I thought it was interesting that when they're talking about the rescue versus the hunting, there's one place, and I know we're not getting into quotes, not really analysis anyway, where Jack Ralph's like, yeah, we want to be rescued. Jack's like, but all the same, I'd really want to kill a pig first. So he's like, yeah, I want to get rescued, but wouldn't it be a bummer if we got rescued before I got to kill a pig? So that's kind of giving you some insight into Jack's character. And then Ralph also emphasizes that one of the reasons that they want to build shelters is to protect them from this perhaps beastie. So that concept of a maybe beastie, Ralph and Jack are both just like, nah, it's probably not real, but just in case, maybe we should do some shelters. So those are like
Simon, the most peaceful of them all, is the one person who's not afraid to bring it up.
Yep.
He's like, oh, you mean the beast?
Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. So, Miss Watson, what was one of your quotes from this chapter?
So I chose a quote. It's from page 51. It's in the middle of the page.
I wonder if we chose the same one.
It says, he tried to convey the compulsion to track down and kill that was swallowing him up. And this was about Jack, and it's just so id. Like, it's just so clearly 100% id. That compulsion, this bloodlust almost, that he just wants to kill this pig. And it's not about getting meat. It's not about making sure people are well fed. It's not about protecting them. It's like just straight up wants to spear this pig. So I chose that one because it gives us insight into Jack as a character, and it's a really clear example of id.
I also highlighted that same moment, and the quote that I really noticed was what you said, and then right after that, where it says, the madness came into his eyes again. Like it's this thing that's kind of overwhelming him to kill. And the other thing that I noticed on page 50 was Ralph. I thought he was really showing up as ego on page 50. And I thought of that because on the bookmark, it says that ego really moderates between id and superego. And on the one hand, he says, okay, this is kind of a long quote, but it's starting on page 50. He says, with frustration about building shelters, and they keep running off. You remember the meeting, how everyone was going to work hard until the shelters were finished? Except me and my hunters. Except the hunters. Well, the little uns, he gesticulated, sought for a word. They're hopeless. The older ones aren't much better. Do you see? All day I've been working with Simon. No one else. They're off bathing or eating or playing. Simon poked his head out carefully. You're chief. You tell him off. Ralph lay flat and looked up at the palm trees in the sky. Meetings. Don't we love meetings? Every day, twice a day, we talk. He got on one elbow. I bet if I blew the conch this minute, they'd come running. Then we'd be, very solemn, and someone would say we ought to build a jet or a submarine or a TV set. When the meeting was over, they'd work for 5 minutes, then wander off or go hunting. I liked that quote because I think Ralph can't make up his mind. On the one hand, he's complaining about the boys having fun and being impulsive. But then on the other hand, he doesn't want that order and structure of meetings. So he's kind of going back and forth. So I thought that could be an ego moment.
I agree that that's an ego moment. It also makes me think of us as teachers sometimes. Oh, everybody's excited for this, and then they start working and they're over it. But yeah, Ralph is really I don't think he wants to be. He's kind of getting that reluctant leader thing going on right now. He doesn't want to be strict and but he's but nobody's helping me, and he feels like it needs to be done. They did mention, and this is a kind of connection to the island. They mentioned a storm. We get a little bit of clues that there was a storm when they first crashed, and they were worried that might happen again. But it seems like it hasn't rained yet since they've been there, which I think is another thing that it contributes to the conflict between Ralph and Jack, because if they didn't have the fresh water and they didn't have the option of the fruit and they didn't have these beautiful beaches with places to swim, they might be more motivated to get rescued, to help with the shelters. But because so far it's a good island, and it's fun, they're not really motivated to help Ralph.
Mm-hmm. The island is providing everything that they need to survive for the time being. So I think that's a good point. Were there any quotes in here that you just really liked?
Yes. Well, there's this one that I think is funny, and it's part of their argument. And so Ralph goes on page 54. Ralph is saying, I was talking about smoke. Don't you want to be rescued? All you can talk about is pig, pig, pig. But we want meat. And I work all day with nothing but Simon, and you come back and don't even notice the huts. I was working too, but you like it, shouted Ralph. You want to hunt while so it's just made me laugh because it really reminded me of an argument that a husband and wife might get into. I've been working at home all day and you didn't even notice, and you were off working, and I don't even like doing this, and you're having fun. So I just thought that was funny. This relationship between Ralph and Jack made me laugh a little bit. And because later on page 55, it says they looked at each other baffled in love and hate. So they love each other, but they're arguing. They have very different like ideas of what their motivation should be, but they're still friends or trying to be. So I just thought
Mhm.
that one was funny. My other favorite quote comes from the description of Simon at the end, so I was going to hold off on that.
That's what I chose too. And I agree. That is a hilarious moment. Like, you didn't even notice my huts.
Mm-hmm.
The quote that I noticed about Simon's Oasis was on page 56. And there are two quotes. One is about how Simon treats the little uns, which I think is really sweet. Towards the top of page 56, I'll just paraphrase this one. But Simon is reaching the fruit that the little uns can't reach
Mm-hmm.
and handing it out to all of their outstretched hands. And I just think it shows him as a really generous, kind, patient character. Um, and then the quote that I really wanted to read out loud on the bottom of page 56 is describing his kind of special place. And it says, he came at last to a place where more sunshine fell, since they had not so far to go for light. Since they had not so far to go for light, the creepers had woven a great mat that hung at the side of an open space in the jungle. For here a patch of rock came close to the surface and would not allow more than little plants and ferns to grow. The whole space was walled with dark aromatic bushes and was a bowl of heat and light. A great tree, fallen across one corner, leaned against the trees that still stood, and a rapid climber flaunted red and yellow sprays right to the top. I think those all of page 56 and page 57 I could read because it's so filled with sunlight and peace and kind of flora and fauna of the jungle. And it's just kind of, when I read those two pages, I just feel like,
yep. I chose
peaceful.
a similar part. He's walking in, and it says into this clearing, and it says, this is on page 57. Nothing moved but a pair of gaudy butterflies that danced around each other in the hot air. Holding his breath, he cocked a critical ear at the sounds of the island. Evening was advancing towards the island. The sound of the bright, fantastic birds, the bee sounds, even the crying of the gulls that were returning to their roosts among the square rocks were fainter. The deep sea breaking miles away on the reef made an undertone less perceptible than the susurration of the blood. So I like that. I mean, it's similar to what you chose, except this is describing the sounds that he's hearing. So when we think about imagery and we think about all your senses, this is describing some of the sounds. And I also chose it because of this like link between, I haven't actually researched or like kind of read more about it, but like the butterflies seem to show up a lot when Simon's around, which I think is interesting and I think is intentional from the author. Just kind of trying to portray his gentle nature and is my best interpretation of that. So I really liked that part. And this also, to jump into the symbolism, because when we're thinking about the island, right, we talked last time about how the descriptions of the island so far are relatively pleasant. In this chapter, we started to see more of the darker stuff, like when it describes Jack hunting at the beginning. And so I chose another quote too from this part, which is the very last paragraph on page 57. It says, now the sunlight had lifted clear of the open space and withdrawn from the sky. Darkness poured out, submerging the waves between the trees till they were dim and strange as the bottom of the sea. The candle buds opened their wide white flowers, glimmering under the light that pricked down from the first stars. Their scent spilled out into the air and took possession of the island. Ooh. So it's describing nighttime falling, and obviously everybody remembers when I talked about nighttime falling from chapter 2, but the way that it described nighttime in chapter 2 on page 43, it says, all at once they were aware of the evening as the end of the light and warmth. And this is such the one from page 57 is such a drastic difference from that, because it describes these flowers opening, and it says they call them candle buds. They're wide white flowers glimmering under the light. So even though it's nighttime, they're still talking about light and this kind of beautiful smell, which I think symbolizes that Simon isn't afraid of the dark. He's not afraid of the night. The coming of night for him on the island does not also bring the end of light and warmth. So he's not rushing out of the woods to go back to the beach with everybody. He's totally fine hanging out in this clearing, even though it is dark. So I think that that's kind of showing that Simon isn't afraid. Like Miss Durgan mentioned earlier, he was like cool to bring up the beast. So he's not scared. And I think that kind of contrast between the description of nighttime coming here and in chapter 2 helps show that.
Yeah, similarly on page 56, when it's describing his entry into the jungle, it's very different from when Jack is in the jungle. When Jack is in the jungle, it's the creepers are sort of intimidating, and the night is ominous. On page 56, though, it says, "Soon high jungle closed in," which could be a scary thing, but then it says, "Tall trunks bore unexpected pale flowers all the way up to the dark canopy where life went on clamorously. The air here was dark too, and the creepers dropped their ropes like the rigging of foundered ships. His feet left prints in the soft soil, and the creepers shivered throughout their lengths when he bumped them." So the creepers aren't scaring him.
He's scaring the creepers.
Are kind of shivering at his touch.
Mm-hmm.
So it kind of shows his comfort and his confidence in the jungle, and it's a calm place for him.
Mm-hmm.
So when you thought about symbolism this week, you're trying to think about what the different kind of ideas could represent. And we asked you to focus on the island, the conch shell, Piggy's glasses, and fire. Do we want to reveal any of those?
I'll give a little glimmer of... So I thought that one of the more interesting ones to think about was the fire, because it almost has multiple meanings compared to some of the other symbols. I think it depends on what character we're thinking about. I think for Ralph, the fire symbolizes hope, because he feels like as long as that fire is going, there's some smoke, there's some hope that they might be rescued. That's what he's really holding on to. But in some other ways, the fire can symbolize like death, destruction, because it burns up half this island. It kills the little kid, right? So, depending on the scenario, depending on the character, the fire can have different meanings. And I think that as we read, we're going to see the shift of what the fire symbolizes. And it's kind of the pendulum swinging there.
And yeah, I don't know if I'm giving too much away, but I do think that so far what we've seen is that when the boys come together and are orderly, the fire serves as something productive and hopeful. Mm-hmm. But when the boys are out of control, then the fire serves as something destructive and kind of harmful.
Yes.
The conch shell we've talked about already in a couple different moments, but it is really symbolizing order and rules. Like when the conch shell comes out, people remember their school behavior in a way. They remember to take turns, to be polite to one another, and to kind of have an orderly way about them.
Yeah. And I know we literally just said we probably weren't going to talk about all of them, but now I'm thinking about Piggy's glasses and the fact that like if you're a person who wears glasses, I mean they're literally and figuratively like clarity. You see better, right, with your glasses, and so the glasses are, and Piggy's really the only one thinking clearly all the time. Like he's really goal oriented. He's like, we're gonna keep things in order. So the glasses are kind of symbolizing that reason. But at the same time, they're used to light the fire, which is like the destructiveness. So that's kind of an interesting contrast with the glasses as well.
So I guess to hold true to our promise, maybe we won't talk about the island yet.
Okay.
I guess we could. I think we've noticed a couple of important things that,
Mhm.
and in some moments it seems dark and ominous. In other moments it seems peaceful,
Mhm.
and it is providing for them everything that they do need to survive. So those are kind of interesting observations.
And
that
I
we
just
could pay
think that
attention
as we go forward, pay attention to those descriptions of the island and how they might change.
to. Mhm.
Well,
Good chat.
That was chapter 3. Success.
That was chapter 3, Huts on the Beach.
Mhm.
And next week we will read
Painted Faces and Long Hair.
Painted Faces and Long Hair. How we will all look at the end of our quarantine.
Yep. I'm ready to cut my hair again. Anyway.
Anywho.
Good talk.
Thanks for tuning in. Good talk.
See you next time.
Like and subscribe this video.
I know.
And listen to Beats by Caleb.
I've already got 2 YouTube subscribers, so what?
Knocking it out of the park.
Yep.
And I really did listen to Beats by Caleb this morning.
I have not listened to Beats by Caleb, but yeah.
It's pretty great to listen to while you're doing your schoolwork.
Yeah. Watch out.
Putting in a plug.
Chewy Manx, we're coming for you.